Well, good morning, and welcome to the welcome to the Wake Up Call radio show, where you'll find the education, encouragement, and inspiration you'll need to change your mind and change your health. The Wake Up Call is an outreach of the Bhakti Wellness Center. I'm Dr. Andrew Litchie of the Bhakti Wellness Center, and this show is brought to you by the Integrated Team for Children with Challenges. So this morning in the studio, we have ITCC, the team. We have Dr. Jacob Merman, who's a medical doctor and classical homeopath.
Hello.
And Suzanne Amanda Wilkes, instructor and practitioner of the Muscatova Neurosensory Motor Reflex Integration.
Hello.
Well, this morning we're going to be talking about our team and what we do. So as we get started, I'll give you our mission. The mission of ITCC is to provide comprehensive, integrative therapy for children with developmental, neurological, psychological, and other challenges. We address the underlying cause of imbalance and not labels. And we strive to meet the need of every child with a carefully individualized interdisciplinary treatment plan, drawing from our joint fields of medicine, homeopathy, naturopathy, childhood reflexes, and neurodevelopment. So as we get started, I suppose the big question is, what are we doing and why are we doing this? So,
Well, I know myself, I'm Suzanne Amanda Wilkes, and I came into this field of neurodevelopment from the field of education. Came to America 18 years ago, and my skills in London as an inner city teacher did not equip me for the children here who had many labels I'd never heard of at the time, like ADHD and so on. So I began to look into the fields of neurodevelopment, and then when I became a Muscatova Neurosensory Motor Integration Specialist and had a clientele, I was looking for a team that could help me with the areas that I couldn't help those children in. So a lot of the children with autism, for example, have gut issues. So,
Yes.
Dr. Drew, that's your specialism. And then I found that the interface of homeopathy with reflexes was a combination that could bring very profound results in the children. So that's where Dr. Merman came in.
Yeah, and I was very happy to join the team because even though I had been taking care of these kids with challenges for years, still some of the things obviously I couldn't do. What Dr. Litchie and Suzanne offered was very complementary to what I was doing, so it really fit well with my understanding.
right, and when we came together in part because there are not teams like this in the cities, or there's not many people, alternative medicine practitioners working together.
Right.
Yeah, alternative medicine practitioners, we're often eclectic and solo type practitioners by nature, hence the alternative medicine, right? It's part of the choice. But we work so much better, so much more effectively together, and so that's one of the things we're trying to do.
Right, and a lot of my clients were having to travel out of state to places like, Chicago and so on, the Pfeiffer Center at the time. And there was a need in the cities for this kind of team that could address all the needs of the children in one area, in one group.
Right, and so to clarify exactly what we're doing, we're not doing conventional medicine. Conventional medicine and conventional treatments like OT and speech and physical therapy and so on are commonly available, and fortunately. However, what is not commonly available for children with challenges is everything else outside of medications, outside of the conventional PT and OT systems. And this is the problem we're trying to solve because, OT and speech work wonderfully. However, it's our philosophy that other things have to be addressed in order for these treatments to be as effective as possible and even work in many cases.
That's right, Drew, and I found with my clientele that they had done the OT, they had done the speech, they had done all of that, and then they were looking for, okay, what's left?
Right. Yeah, and so, well, what we're really trying to do is get at the underlying terrain or physical and energetic characteristics of the individual. The behavior and some of the medicine works very well, but a lot of people are not addressing the underlying physicality and terrain of the person. And that's where we come in, is trying to change how the body works and how it communicates with itself in a big way. So how do we do that? We have a program that we've been working on, and it's an 8-step program. And we'll go over the program briefly and tell you what we do. So the first step is a 1-hour intake with all 3 of us. And after that, consult with myself, and then consult with Dr. Merman, and then an intake with Suzanne. And after that, we have follow-ups either weekly or monthly, depending on the needs of the person or the provider, and then we evaluate after 3 months. So I think this first step, the 1-hour intake, is one of the special things that we do, is all 3 of us are in the room for an hour with parents and kid, and we're all doing a brief screening intake. And this helps us focus what we need to do and why. And it allows us to start communicating about the person specifically and individually, to know where we best fit in. Because every person does not need everything we do, and so that's an important part of this. And I think this is one of the unique things we do. And after that, we go through consultations. The first consultation is with me, and that's because I tend to order lab tests. So a naturopathic consult involves a careful medical history. I'll take a look at lab tests, talk about nutrition and so on, and then see if more specialized testing is needed. My focus is getting away, trying to resolve the obstacles to healing. Things like gastrointestinal problems, food intolerance, other physical problems, nutrient deficiencies, and so on, that get in the way of healing. And it's just getting this groundwork dealt with is core for allowing the body to heal itself. And that's where I come from all the time, is how can I help facilitate the self-healing process and help people heal themselves and get the things out of the way so other things can work. And after that, it'll be intake with Dr. Merman.
What I need to figure out is how to start the process that I do. I use 2 modalities mostly with these kids. One is classical homeopathy, and the other is Dr. Hinz's neurotransmitter replacement approach. So to a little bit better understand how I'm thinking about this, the analogy is a computer. If the computer doesn't work, there could be some issue with the hardware, and maybe there's some bugs in the operating system. So when I'm looking at a child, or an adult for that matter, I'm kind of looking at the body in the same way. So the hardware, or so to speak, hardware issues could be naturopathic, could be something to be done with, dealt with medically, such as medications, could be something mechanical, like chiropractic. And so I either do that myself or refer to other people. That's where Drew and Suzanne come in. Sometimes we can address the neurotransmitter issues with Dr. Hinz's approach. These are nutritional supplements which often help extremely well in cases of ADD, ADHD, OCD, depression, and similar issues. And homeopathy is more of like an operating system debugging, where we give remedies which very deeply change how the body works, and then the body is able to deal with its own issues on a more physical level. This is not easy to explain. The whole explanation is actually in my booklet, Demystifying Homeopathy, which can be found on bookonhealing.com website. Basically, the whole thing is explained there. When I'm looking at a child with issues, in kids, I prefer to use homeopathy because it's a deeper and more permanent fix. But in many cases, neurotransmitter supplements are often helpful, at least in the initial stages.
Great. And then after the intake with Dr. Merman to figure out what is most appropriate working with neurotransmitters or homeopathy, then they will do a full intake with Suzanne.
Right, and what I'm working with when I see a child is really with the neurological system, and I'm working with the sensory motor loop of that system, and trying to either interrupt a neuron pathway that isn't working, or to myelinate pathways that need deeper myelination. What that means is, like when the child is born, they're born with billions of neurons which form a network of synaptic connections. And by 3 years old, these are quite dense, and these are pathways, automatic pathways that lead to movement, to sensory perception, to speech, to emotional behaviors. And I work with the reflexes, which are at the very foundation of this neurology. And the reflexes are sensory motor patterns that lead to this development.
Yeah, and we're going to have to take a break shortly now, and we'll come back and keep talking about
All
that.
right.
So I'd like to invite you all to call in at 952-946-6205 if you have any questions for us as we discuss what we're up to at the Integrative Team for Children with Challenges. Well, welcome back to the Wake Up Call radio show. You're here, we're talking about the Integrative Team for Children with Challenges. You can learn more about the team at itcc3.com, and you can schedule a complimentary intake with the team at 612-259-8529. And once again, if you have any questions for us, would like to talk about what we're talking about, please feel free to call in at 952-946-6205. So, when we had to go to break, we were talking with Suzanne about reflexes and what you do as a neurodevelopmental reflex integration specialist.
Right.
So,
Well, I work with MNRI, which is Musculoskeletal Neurosensory Motor Reflex Integration, which is a mouthful. But what that basically means is I'm working with the neurology of the child at the level of the muscles and the sensory motor loops. So my hands are on the child, and I work with muscle patterns which then feed into the neurology to increase myelination and synaptic connections. At birth, the baby's born with so many, but we have an estimated 100 billion neurons in our brain with 10,000 synapses, which is, all the connection points. So that's a lot of potential. So the children I see often have challenges, and so it's like, how do we take this challenge to the next level? How do we take function to the next level? If a child has problem with vision, how do we improve the vision? If a child has problem with movement or can't move, how do we trigger movement? How do we trigger sensory perception? How do we trigger better behavior?
yeah, and that's what I find so interesting about what you do is how it's like a language that you can speak with the body and remind it how to do things, and when it can't remember how to do it, or you can actually repattern that.
Well, that's exactly it, Drew. You hit the nail on the head. The reflexes are the language, they're the code of the brainstem. So when you integrate a reflex, or when you work on a reflex in a child, you are speaking to the brain in its own code. And that's magic, because the brain finally goes, okay, someone understands me. So the definition of a reflex is a nervous system reaction caused by a sensory stimulation. But that stimulation has to be adequate and specific. So, I work with probably 50 different reflexes when I work with a client, and I'm working with unconscious processes. So that's also, to me, amazing, because Sechenov, who was one of the great Russian neuroscientists back in 1863, said every act of life, conscious or unconscious, originates in reflexes.
Right. And it makes sense that this would be so important, especially for little kids that, they don't have the language capacity, or maybe their challenge doesn't give them the language capacity to really explain exercises and do exercises perfectly, and then when you can help provide that.
Right.
Yeah.
What's really nice is the kid just lies there on the massage table, and it's very relaxing. And because you're speaking to the brain in its own language, even little babies, 3-year-olds, they can lie there for hours once they get used to the work and receive this work. And at the same time, it's relaxing, but their brain is working really hard, and they are developing. And they lie on the table and they get up and they feel great about themselves because they just did a whole heap of hard work.
Right. Yeah.
You know? So, working with the reflexes, I'm working with their sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems with the flight, fight, and the freeze responses.
Mhm.
So all the kids with autism, all those emotional behaviors, I can get right into the, the core of it, into the, what's behind those hand stimming, the stimming behaviors, the repetitive, obsessive loops. I can get right into it, and I can interrupt it.
Yeah, and that is so important and so helpful. And so you've heard a little bit about how we, where we tend to work with the person and the body, and really the idea of this is the philosophy and how we work together. Naturopathic medicine has a really nice sequence of treatment. It's called the therapeutic order that even though we're all not, I'm the only naturopathic doctor here, we actually all follow this to some degree. It's very interesting. So in the therapeutic order, there's 7 steps. The first is to identify conditions for health. And this is what I do fundamentally in the group, is identify conditions for health and get obstacles to cure out of the way. And so this is working with basic physiology, and then stimulate the healing power of nature, or the vital force. And Dr. Merman, this is really the domain of homeopathy in many ways.
Yeah, vital force is, it's maybe a strange name for some people, but that's why I prefer to call it the operating system, because that's how it functions. It's basically has the full control of the body and manages everything. And when there are some bugs, so to speak, in the operating system, we start seeing dysfunction in the body in whatever way. There might be an ADD, there might be asthma, there might be rash, there might be belly aches. And if you fix that underlying problem or remove the bug, debug the system, the body starts working better on its own. And everything's okay. This is achieved by prescribing a single remedy, a single homeopathic remedy to the child after a long interview where I review all aspects of the child's life, and basically the remedy becomes clear. If I feel that there are some obstacles that need to be resolved first, Dr. Leachy deals with some of that, or Suzanne, or we can manage the neurotransmitters serotonin and dopamine with Dr. Hinz's system, which I sometimes employ.
Yeah, and the homeopathic intake, I think, is worth talking about, because this is one of the most interesting medical intakes you have. How you match the remedy to the individual person, and then you choose symptoms that that are peculiar and unusual, right?
Right. Yeah. That's strange, rare, and peculiar is the keywords we need to use. So, for example, if a kid, for example, has a depression or ADD, these are not the symptoms I would take. But I would need to know a lot more about the child. For example, are they really shy? Are they hiding from strangers, or are they afraid of a lot of things? So, for example, a very shy child who is having inferiority complex about themselves might be a so-called Barreda-Carb case. That's a remedy in homeopathy. A child who is very afraid of things might be a stramonium case. One who is very restless and moving all the time, and as soon as they hear music, they're going to be jumping up and down in rhythm, might be a tarantula case. One who is, very afraid of robbers and is very neat in particular might be an arsenic case. So many, many remedies to choose from.
Right.
And I took my son to see Dr. Merman, and I was just so amazed by the process of him listening. He listened to him for so long. I don't know how many hours we were there.
A couple hours.
Couple hours, and just all aspects of my son's life. And my son felt so heard, so heard. I don't know how many children get that experience when they visit a doctor, believing, just, it's almost healing just by being heard. And then when Dr. Merman came to the final remedy, my son confirmed it and was like, "Oh, Mom," it was a metal remedy, and he was like, "Mom, I'm always wanting to lick that metal." It was amazing.
Well, you're listening to here at the Wake Up Call, the integrative team for children with challenges. If you have any questions, feel free to call in 952-946-6205. Well, welcome back to the Wake Up Call radio show. I'm Dr. Andrew Litchie, and I'm here with the integrative team for children with challenges. So now we have a caller giveaway. The fourth caller who calls in at 952-946-6205 will get a complimentary intake with the team. So we were just talking a little bit about how what we do fits in with the general philosophy. I was talking about how I identify in conditions for health and address obstacles through cure, through specialized testing, gastrointestinal health, genomic, nutrigenomics, and so on. And Dr. Merman was just talking about homeopathy and how it works, stimulate the healing capacity of the body and the operating system. And the next in the therapeutic order is addressing weakened or damaged organs and systems and structural integrity. And I think this is, of course, where Suzanne fits in, working with the structural capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm, the children I've seen over the years, both in private practice and at the camps I do with the Mascatoba organization, have been anything from, maybe a kid with a mild auditory processing disorder to children who are paralyzed, who are severe quadriplegics, who are blind, who are hard of hearing. And the structural aspects of the system I have seen change. I've seen children who are cortically blind start tracking shadows, and from that start perceiving. I've seen children who have hard of hearing get hearing back. I see one child who was hard of hearing in one ear, and the hearing came back in that ear. We have one child at our camp in San Diego who comes every year, and when he was born, the doctor said he would just be a vegetable. And this child, he was severe cerebral palsy, and he has done years and years and years of reflex therapy. He is now, he does Special Olympics. He was doing breakdancing at one of the camps. His gait is almost normal. He's just up on his toes. He's aware of his body. He says, "Okay, I need to work on bringing my heels down." His speech is normal. He's intelligent. He's in school. It is so profound, the function that can develop once you get the child on that developmental timeline, which begins with reflex integration, because that's what develops it in the first place in neurotypical babies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and stories like that are so important, because we do this because we know it works and we're passionate about it, and we wanna provide these services to people who may not know about them otherwise. So let's talk through a couple cases quick about how we have worked with children and what has happened. So, Dr. Merman.
We're talking about right now mostly about kids with mental, emotional issues, developmental issues, and this would be just one aspect of a case in any case. So just want to introduce the depth of homeopathy. Let me tell you about this case. This girl came in with kidney problem, so-called nephrotic syndrome, minimal change disease. She was already on steroids. They were not working well, and the nephrologist was concerned about kidney failure, and this was a 9-year-old. So we started on homeopathy, and very slowly, over the next a year or so, she was basically cured. She was off steroids, the kidneys were working fine, the nephrotic syndrome was resolved. Coincidence? Possibly, but we see those all the time. Uh, the same kid had certain psychological issues, and they improved while we were dealing with the kidneys. So we deal with the whole person at the same time, mental, emotional, physical, at the same time with a single remedy. That's homeopathic approach.
Great. Yeah, it's fun to hear the case studies of things that are not supposed to be so curable that are addressed. Kidney disease is particularly challenging. Sometimes you're right; it can just go away, but usually you don't expect that, especially when on steroids for a period of time and so on.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well.
And some simpler things with homeopathy again, because that's my interest mostly. We're treating epidemic diseases with it. Influenza responds wonderfully to homeopathy, very fast. On the correct remedy will reverse a case, that is, the person starts feeling better within several hours. If that doesn't happen, that means the remedy is wrong. Lately, we are even treating Ebola in Africa with homeopathy. Sounds strange? Well, no, not to us, because homeopathy has been used in epidemics for 200 years. We're already seeing initial results. We have a family of 6 people just survived when they started getting homeopathic remedies in Liberia. More information on that is at flusolution.net. That's our website to deal with epidemics. So very, very interesting work.
Absolutely. Well, and let me tell you a case that I've had recently that demonstrates the power of gastrointestinal health and simply diet and some basic supplementation. Just getting these problems out of the way can be remarkable. So recently, seeing an 8-year-old who came to me because she was falling behind in school. She's 3rd grade, was reading at a 1st grade level or worse, and it was clear that things were not keeping up. Her school system was not in Minnesota, and so the way they do things is not as aggressively as sometimes we do things in Minneapolis. So mom was just basically watching as eval went by before they actually were going to start an intervention. So when she came, we talked about her history, and it was clear she had some allergies, constant stuffy nose, tonsils were swollen, and history of general allergies in the family, and she's having tummy aches and so on. So we just did a very basic allergy panel and a food intolerance panel. And based on the results, changing her diet and some simple changes with her supplement program, which was very simple, adding fish oil, appropriate multivitamin, a little probiotics. Within a couple weeks, 4 weeks, her teacher was writing emails to mom about the massive improvement. And this is what we'd like to see, right? When the providers that are helping the kid ask what are they doing, and you see this because there have been such a dramatic change, and see this very repeatedly. When the treatment is appropriate, when things are working, it is outside the expectations of development for the child, and that's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had teachers actually stop by the practice, wondering what happened to the child. Why don't they need to be in a special ed classroom anymore? Because a remedy worked. People don't understand how such a little thing, seemingly little thing, may create such a profound effect.
Yeah, I've seen dramatic things too. I think it can go both ways with the reflexes. Sometimes it's a slow, steady pace and incremental. Probably more often than not, it's incremental, and there are slow, gradual changes. Like an 11-year-old male with autism and Asperger's diagnosis that I treated for a couple of years. He had breathing difficulties, toe walking, high anxiety, poor sleep, information processing issues, very low tone, which the kids with autism tend to have. He had constipation. He had the stimming behaviors of the hand flapping, the head banging, other self-stimming behaviors. He had obsessive tendencies, was very hypersensitive to correction, which a lot, again, of the autism children, they take it very personally. And emotional dysregulation with no friendships. So over the couple years of treatment, everything resolved. Some of them resolved quickly, like the sleep resolved, the constipation resolved, and the toe walking resolved over the first 6-month period. although some of those returnment therapy was interrupted. But over time, he became more relaxed, greater self-confidence. He handled transitions better. The hand flapping ceased, better emotional regulation. And he's in high school now. He's developed strong friendships with children. It's a school for children with autism. And he's a happy kid now. I mean, completely different. And that was over a period of 2 years. And then I've also seen like overnight change, like dramatic. There was one little girl with PTSD whose mother came to one of my presentations, and she was an 8-year-old female with the diagnosis of PTSD, and wasn't sleeping at all, wasn't eating, nervous stomach, poor eye contact, low facial affect. She was pale, she was fearful, she couldn't look me in the eye, she was extremely timid and social withdrawn. And when 3 days later, after 2 sessions, she was eating, laughing, she was talking, her sense of humor returned, she had very strong fears where she couldn't leave her mother's side. She walked to the garage all by herself. In the dark, she slept through the night. And a week later, she was normal. So yeah, we can have dramatic turnarounds too.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we're doing this and why we're talking about it. And when we work together, the results can be even more dramatic. You know, I think things are frequently missed when a team approach is not conducted, and the way we are working together is we can talk to each other, make sure we're not missing important points, and bring our different philosophies together to see the child with a different lens.
Yeah, it's about humility, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
You know, the medicine is so wide, and there's no one person who can understand all of it. And you really need to bring in experts in different aspects of medicine to really provide good, integrative, complete therapy. Otherwise, you're definitely going to miss. Unfortunately, that is not understood by a lot of practitioners, especially medical doctors. I am a medical doctor, I can speak for that. You know, I often talk to my colleagues, and it's hard to get the point across sometimes. But it's very, very, very important. Conventional medicine covers maybe 5 to 10% of all of medicine, and there's so much more out there that needs to be used for full effect.
Absolutely. And what we're also not saying this is an exclusion to conventional medicine, because it absolutely has a place, but these kind of issues and the way we work is really outside of the scope of the paradigm of conventional medicine.
Right, I think the difference is we're working with a synergy. We want to create a synergy of modalities, and conventional medicine, each specialist works in their own area, and it's all discrete, it's all separate, rather than synergistic.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's about more than signs and symptoms. It's about looking at processes, looking at patterns within within people, and addressing those patterns.
Right.
And
And
the main thing really is it's about stimulating the body to improve permanently on its own and keep on functioning at a better state of health, as opposed to suppressing symptoms with whatever means, medications or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
think
it's about the child that's in front of us. You know, it's not about our branch of medicine or our modality or our protocol. It's about the child. We start with them.
absolutely. Yeah, I like what you said about humility, and it's about service, and what can we bring to the family that will work for them.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we've been talking about the integrative team for children with challenges here on the Wake Up Call. Feel free to call in with any questions or comments, 952-946-6205. Well, good morning and welcome back to the Wake Up Call radio show, where you find the education, encouragement, and inspiration you need to change your mind and change your health. This morning, I'm Dr. Andrew Litchi, joined with Dr. Jacob Merman and Susanna Manor-Wilkes, and we're talking about the integrative team for children with challenges. If you have any questions on this last section, please call in. It is 952-946-6205, and if you'd like more information about what we do, you can take a look at our website, www.itcc3.com. And so now we're back, and we've been talking about some cases, and we'd like to let you know how it is for families and parents as they go through this program. So, at the intake, we will begin communication, and begin an open line of communication. And this is one of the things that we strive to do very well, is be in clear communication with parents and other providers at all times, and be a resource as people go through this process.
Yeah, I always tell my parents that, you know, development is a journey, and it's just not a linear, you know, development doesn't go from step 1 to step 10 like a flight of stairs. There's ups and there's downs. You might take 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but there's a continual progression towards higher function. So in my model, one thing I'm informed by is the work of Vygotsky, one of the Russian psychologists. And he has this concept of transitions or crisis. So before a new level of development, the child might go through like a mini transition or a mini crisis where you might see a reversion or a exacerbation of symptoms. And I just let my parents know, don't worry about that. It's a really good sign. It's part of the process. And I think Dr. Merman has a similar.
Yeah, very similar. In homeopathy, we talk about aggravations, and these are basically usually a return of some old symptoms. Well, think about it. When you have a person who is not functioning at the top, to us it means they're in the wrong balance in some way. So to bring them to a better balance, often we need to unbalance them a little bit first. And then once you do that, the person may experience a little bit of a discomfort, usually not much, and then things start falling into place. Seen very commonly with homeopathic medicine. For example, you treat somebody with asthma, for example, and as the asthma improves, they may start itching for a while, and even especially if that symptom was present some years ago. So a return of old symptom is always a good thing. We support the families through this. Email is always answered, even on weekends. There's always, you know, you can call and get a call back from me, you know, usually very fast. And then it's managed in between visits.
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of a developmental crisis is, of course, in naturopathic medicine as well, with the idea of a healing crisis and fevers. But, you know, you see it in normal childhood development, too. You know, what are the terrible twos all about? The terrible twos are about kids learning boundaries and how to apply them, and they don't apply them perfectly at first, right?
Right.
And yep. And so parents are not like, oh no, my child has become a little dictator. No, that's an exciting moment, and because it's a step along the way. And so
absolutely. When we see those terrible twos reemerging in like maybe teenagers who've never ever opposed their parents because they're in such a passive or hypo state, we cheer.
Yep.
Yay, development.
Right. And you know, another thing that we see in children that we end up working with is asynchronous development and individual development. And so we see kids that are really far ahead in some ways and really far behind in some ways. So as these things balance out, of course there's going to be turmoil. And the other analogy I really like, particularly with any whole system of medicine, is when you have a whole interconnected system and everything is all connected, when you change one part, that will change the whole system, right? But you'd expect a period of time when everything will have to reset and work together. And so that's another way I think of the healing crisis, is just kind of the gears reshifting and getting back into line.
And in fact, that's one of the beauties of working in an integrative team, is when some type of a crisis like this occurs, often one of the other approaches may be very useful in mitigating it and helping the child through that period of, you know, a difficult time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think parents already, they know about the rescue remedy from the Bach flower remedies, which are, you know, homeopathic remedies, are they, Dr. Merman?
They are sort of homeopathic, not quite.
Not quite. But, you know, lots of parents will you know, give rescue remedy to get child through a transition, whereas with Dr. Merman, he can give something a little more thought, you know, individually tailored to the child.
Absolutely, and this is one of the things I'm always thinking about when I'm working with people, is getting things in line so the healing crisis does not have to be so intense. When other things are in place, like appropriate body systems, appropriate detoxification, appropriate GI health, well, the body's healing crisis often doesn't have to be so dramatic.
Right.
And
Right.
that's the idea.
Right.
Yeah, and also the more the child works with the program, the less intense those little transition periods are. And then the beauty of the, inverted commas healing crisis, I think we need to find a new name for a healing transition, is the next level of development. And then when everything,
Yeah.
it's like when you clean out your bedroom, there's a mess everywhere, and then you finally put everything back to place, and you're like, that was worth it.
And very important to remember with all this talk about healing crises, this is payment for something very big. We are creating permanent improvement to health.
Mhm.
We're not trying to put you on medication and keep you on it forever. That's not the idea. We need to treat and then withdraw and let you be on your own, functioning well, with no further support.
That's right. That is the goal for all of us, is not being on homeopathics or supplements the rest of your life. Even if you have to do a healing diet, not the thing you have to follow all the time. There will be time for cake, and that's the goal, right? To be able to have flexibility, good quality of life, and do what the child wants to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess the goal of, the ultimate goal of ITCC is, to have the parent, the child not come to see us anymore, but also to support and to facilitate their own internal healing to the point where they can lead a happier, healthier, more integrated, more functional life, where family life becomes easier for everyone in the family system.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, because that's part of health. Having fun.
What is your
Enjoying life.
definition of health, Dr. Ritchie?
Oh, boy. Well, in 1
Do we have
minute.
time for that?
My definition of health is not the absence of symptoms or absence of disease, but it's the optimal functioning of an individual, irregardless of disease states or symptoms. And what this means is it's possible to have a problem, a limp, or some condition like asthma, and really be an actualized human being. And that's the line I want to draw, is like, it's not about perfection, it's about being the best you can be, your greatest potential. And that includes quality of life, that includes meaning, and it includes vitality and enjoyment. So something like that, that's well, with that, that's our cue. You've been listening to the Integrative Team for Children with Challenges on the Wake Up Call radio show, where you find the education, encouragement, and inspiration you need to change your mind and change your health. You can contact us at itcc3.com.